It was a clear morning over the Nevada desert, the kind of airspace where the U.S. Air Force reigned supreme. Miles of scorched earth stretched to the horizon, dotted only by jagged mountain ridges and the occasional shimmer of heat haze rising from the sand. Inside the NORAD Operations Center, the routine hum of activity was broken by a blip on the radar screen. Unregistered contact. Bearing 215, altitude low, speed fast, called out the air surveillance technician, his voice tightening. He zoomed the screen in, expecting a small Cessna or maybe a business jet that had strayed off course. Instead, the radar return was unusually clean, strong, and steady. This was no hobby aircraft. Squawk code? The senior controller asked, leaning forward. No transponder response. Completely dark. That was the first red flag. Any aircraft in controlled airspace was required to have a transponder broadcasting its identity and altitude. This one was flying blind and silent, like it didn't care who noticed, or worse, like it wanted to be noticed only at the last moment. Radio it, the controller ordered. Unidentified aircraft, this is NORAD control. You are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately. The transmission went out in clear, firm tones. Silence. The technician tried again. Unidentified aircraft, you are entering prohibited military airspace. State your call sign and intentions, or you will be intercepted. Still no reply. The controller's eyes met those of the watch commander. It was the kind of wordless communication that passed between people who had done this long enough to know when a situation wasn't just a mistake. Scramble Raptors, the watch commander ordered. Within seconds, alarms were sounding at a nearby Air Force base. 2 F-22 Raptor stealth interceptors designed for air superiority roared to life. Their pilots, call signs Falcon and Blade, had just finished a training sortie and were still in flight gear when they were told to strap back in. Target is 30 miles out, heading east, low altitude, came the voice in their helmets as they taxied. Copy. We'll have eyes on in 2 minutes, Falcon replied. His tone was calm, but his mind was already running through possibilities. Drug. Runners, smugglers, or maybe some rich daredevil with a death wish. The Raptors lifted off the runway in perfect unison, afterburners kicking them into the pale morning sky. Climbing only slightly to avoid overshooting, they banked toward the target's last known position. At 20 miles out, the Raptors went to military power and dropped to an intercept altitude of just under 3,000 feet. Dust devils swirled beneath them as the desert blurred past. Then they saw it. Visual, Blade reported. Falcon's eyes narrowed. Ahead, against the endless sand, was a small, weathered jet, not the polished white of a private Gulfstream, not the rough patchwork of a smuggler's plane. This one was military, or had been. Its paint was sun-bleached, markings faint, but he could make out the ghost of an insignia along the fuselage. The wings were slender, swept, and the nose had that needle-pointed look of high-performance trainers. But it was old, older than anything that should have been flying here. As they closed in, Falcon caught sight of the cockpit. A woman sat inside, helmet visor down, posture perfectly straight. No nervous glances, no fumbling with controls. She was flying like she'd been born in the seat smooth, confident, unshaken by the Raptors on her tail. Unidentified aircraft. This is Falcon of the United States Air Force. You are in restricted airspace. Respond immediately, he transmitted. Nothing. He tried again, more pointed. Aircraft on heading 0-9-0, respond, or you will be forced to land. Still silence. Control Falcon, he radioed back to NORAD. Target is ignoring comms, maintaining heading, altitude steady. Visual confirms single pilot, unknown type aircraft, appears military vintage. Recommend further instructions. There was a pause before the voice from NORAD returned. Falcon, maintain position. Stand by for possible intercept protocol. Copy. Blade slid into position on the other side of the intruder, forming a perfect escort triangle. The two Raptors were now so close that Falcon could see scratches on the jet's canopy. The aircraft was smaller than he'd expected, maybe. Half the size of an F-22, but the way it cut through the air was unnerving. "This thing's no antique in the handling department," Blade murmured over their private channel. Falcon agreed. Every small correction she made on the stick was exact, balanced, like she'd rehearsed this intercept from the other side of the equation. Whoever she wasn't just a random intruder. Back at NORAD, the air picture updated every few seconds. Officers leaned over screens, reading telemetry, watching the drama unfold in real time. "Where's she coming from?" someone asked. "No flight plan filed. No radar trail beyond 30 miles west," replied an analyst. "It's like she just appeared over the desert." "Not possible," muttered the watch commander. And yet, there she was, gliding across the Nevada sky with two of America's most advanced fighters shadowing her like hawks. Falcon toggled his radio again, one last attempt before considering escalation. "Unidentified aircraft, respond now." This time, the woman shifted in her seat. Her gloved hand reached toward the radio panel. Falcon leaned forward instinctively, waiting. The radio crackled to life. But instead of giving her name, registration, or reason for being there, she said nothing. Just waited. The carrier signal was open, as if she were listening to them breathe. Then, in the faintest trace of movement, she rolled her jet slightly, just enough for the morning sun to catch the edge of her fuselage. Falcon caught a glimpse of something numbers? A symbol? But the angle changed too fast to read it clearly. "Blade, did you see that?" "Yeah, looks like she wanted us to." For another 30 seconds, she held formation between them, unhurried. Not once did she look directly at them. Yet somehow her presence in the airspace felt commanding, as if she were the one allowing them to fly alongside her. Falcon's instincts were buzzing. This was no lost civilian, no rogue stunt pilot. This was someone who knew exactly where she was, exactly what she was doing, and exactly how much she could push before the Air Force made its next move. And somehow, he had the unsettling feeling that she'd been here before. The three aircraft cut across the Nevada sky in perfect, tense symmetry. The small, weathered jet in the center, two F-22 Raptors flanking it like steel-gray sentinels. At altitude, the desert below seemed endless, a rippling expanse of pale gold broken only by dry riverbeds and jagged black ridges. The air was smooth, the kind pilots called glass, but inside the cockpits, the tension was anything but calm. Falcon's breathing was steady, deliberate. He'd been in intercept scenarios before, but there was something off about this one. A normal intruder might weave, try to outrun, or make clumsy turns anything to shake a tail. This pilot wasn't doing any of that. She flew as though she belonged here, matching the Raptor's speed and altitude without even glancing their way. "Control, Falcon," he radioed. "Target is maintaining heading. No evasive action. No radio acknowledgement." The reply from NORAD was crisp but edged with curiosity. "Copy, Falcon. Hold position. Attempt further contact." Falcon pressed. His mic switch. "Unidentified aircraft, you are in prohibited U.S. military airspace. You are ordered to respond immediately." Again, nothing. Not even a click of static in reply. On the opposite wing, Blade shifted slightly, inching closer, to get a better look at the pilot through the canopy. "Falcon," he said on their secure interplane channel, "she's not panicking. She's not even looking at us. It's like we're just part of her flight plan." "Yeah," Falcon muttered. "Feels like she's leading us somewhere." The thought was unsettling. Intercepts were supposed to be about control fighters, dictating where the intruder went. But here, the woman's unhurried confidence made it feel like they were the ones being tested. From the ground, the picture wasn't much clearer. Technicians and analysts watched the radar feed, murmuring among themselves. One of the younger officers leaned toward the watch commander. "Sir, the aircraft's performance envelope is unusual. She's holding steady at 540 knots at this altitude in something that shouldn't be this fast." "Shouldn't be this fast?" the commander repeated, skeptical. The officer pointed at a display. "Sir, if that's a T-38 Talon, even a heavily modified one, she's pushing it beyond safe operational limits. And she's doing it like it's a Sunday drive." Back in the air, Ladd finally decided to try something different. He dipped his nose slightly, then pulled ahead, crossing in front of her jet at a safe distance. A classic follow-me maneuver meant to signal the intruder to change heading. She didn't budge. Instead, she adjusted her throttle fractionally, sliding right back into her original place in the formation, like nothing had happened. Blade swore under his breath. "This is getting weird." Falcon keyed up again. "Unidentified aircraft, this is your final warning. Comply with instructions or you will be forced to land." This time, she moved just a subtle tilt of her head inside the helmet, as if acknowledging the words but finding them optional. Then, in a single smooth motion, her gloved hand reached for the radio controls. Falcon tensed. After all this silence, maybe she was ready to talk. The radio crackled, but instead of the usual preamble, "No, this is or, copy." Her voice came through clear, even, and unsettlingly composed. "Eagle 2-1, she said, pausing just long enough for the words to register. "This is Viper." Falcon's brain froze for a second. The call sign hit him like a jolt. He'd heard it before, not in casual conversation, but in the kind of hushed stories pilots told in squadron bars. Viper, a name belonged to a legend. A test pilot from the late 80s and 90s, whose skill in the air was the kind that instructors used as benchmarks. She'd been the one they said could outfly anyone, anywhere, in any aircraft. She'd trained some of the best men and women whose names were now in the history books. And then, without warning or explanation, she'd vanished from active duty 2 decades ago. Every pilot knew the rumors. Some said she'd been recruited into black projects, so secret they didn't officially exist. Others swore she'd been lost on a mission no one could talk about. But there was one thing they all agreed on. If you ever heard the name Viper over a secure military channel, you paid attention. "Control, Falcon," he said quickly. "The intruder has identified herself as Viper. Repeat, Viper." There was a pause on the line longer than normal, filled with a static hiss. When NORAD replied, the voice was slower, measured. "Stand by, Falcon. Do not take any aggressive action." Blade's voice came through on the private channel, low and tight. "Falcon, if she's really who she says she is, we're flying next to a ghost." Falcon didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the weathered jet, on the woman who now felt less like an intruder and more like the center of some operation he didn't understand. NORAD came back on the main channel. "Falcon, Blade maintain escort formation. We're running a full ID check now." The word escort was telling. Moments ago, they'd been ordered to intercept and possibly force her down. Now the tone had shifted, cautious, almost deferential. In the air, the silence between transmissions was thick. The sun was higher now, the heat haze shimmering off the wings of all 3 aircraft. Falcon glanced down at the desert tiny specks of vehicles crawling along distant highways, oblivious to the fact that history might be flying just above them. He looked back at the jet. She hadn't moved out of position by more than a meter since they'd found her. No wasted motion, no unnecessary corrections. That level of control wasn't just skill. It was muscle memory honed over thousands of hours in the cockpit. And then, a thought hit him hard. If she had been flying black projects all these years, what else did she know? What else could she do in that aircraft? An ORAD's next transmission broke the thought. Falcon, blade confirmation in progress. You are cleared to escort the intruder to Nellis Air Force Base. Maintain current altitude and speed. Repeat, do not engage. Falcon exhaled slowly. This was no longer an interception. This was a handoff to something bigger, something well above his pay grade. He glanced at Blade, who gave a tiny nod through his visor. The two Raptors adjusted slightly, sliding into a more protective position on either side of Viper's jet. For the first time since they'd found her, she turned her head toward Falcon. The dark visor hid her eyes, but he felt the weight of her attention, like she was silently confirming that they understood their new roles. And then, without a word, she nudged her throttle and led them toward Nellis. Falcon followed, the desert rushing beneath them, the air thick with the unspoken understanding that whatever was about to happen would be remembered for a very long time. The sun was climbing fast over Nevada, its glare washing the desert in a hard white light. The three aircraft, two F-22 Raptors, and the small weathered jet flew in precise formation. Below them, the ground blurred past, jagged ridgelines, parched valleys, and the occasional flash of sunlight from an abandoned mine shaft. Inside Falcon's cockpit, his eyes kept scanning the old jet. Every inch of it told a story, though most of the details were obscured by time and sandblasted. Paint, faded lines where markings used to be. Rivets that didn't quite match, suggesting repairs or modifications done far from any official depot. The fuselage bore the scars of long service, yet there was nothing sloppy about its upkeep. Whoever maintained it had done so with precision. Blade, Falcon said on their secure interplane frequency, tell me you're seeing the tail number. Yeah, Blade replied, leaning forward slightly in his seat to get a better view. But it's wrong. Wrong how? It's military, no doubt. But it's not current. That format hasn't been used since. Blade stopped, recalculating. Since before I was even in flight school. Falcon frowned. In the military, aircraft tail numbers were like fingerprints. They told you the branch, the year of manufacture, sometimes even the squadron. This one was like finding a signature from a ghost completely legitimate in style, yet decades out of date. You're thinking this is some museum bird, someone decided. To joyride? Falcon asked, though he didn't believe it for a second. Blade's laugh was humorless. Museum birds don't do 540 knots at low altitude without rattling themselves apart. And they sure as hell don't hold perfect trim with two Raptors breathing down their neck. From the ground, NORAD analysts were pulling every database they could access. Aircraft registration logs, maintenance records, even archived lists of experimental prototypes. Still, the ID came back murky. The tail number matched an aircraft listed as decommissioned in 1999 scrapped, officially. Up in the air, Falcon's instincts were gnawing at him. He'd flown against skilled adversaries before, but this was different. This woman wasn't just keeping up, she was leading in subtle ways, dictating the pace without breaking formation. Control, Falcon called over the main channel, requesting intel on Intruder's airframe. Looks like a T-38 Talon variant, but with significant modifications. Performance exceeds spec. A pause. Then, copy Falcon. We're still. Verifying. Maintain escort. Confirm no hostile action observed. No hostile action, Falcon said. Yet, the quiet between transmissions gave him too much time to think. If this really was a T-38, it had been reworked to the point of becoming something else entirely. The wingtips were sharper. The intakes looked subtly reshaped, like they'd been optimized for higher airflow. Even the skin panels reflected light differently, not polished aluminum, but a composite blend he didn't recognize. "Blade," Falcon said. "Check the undercarriage. Anything?" Blade dipped lower for a moment, scanning. Gear doors are clean. No hard points visible. But he hesitated. But what? There's a panel on the belly that doesn't belong there. Not on any Talon I've ever seen. Looks removable. That was interesting. Removable panels usually meant access to electronics, sensors, or something you didn't want visible. In flight, Falcon's curiosity deepened. Every time he thought he'd cataloged the oddities of this aircraft, something new popped up. This wasn't just a modified trainer, it was a platform for something classified. And then there was her. Flying. She didn't just fly well. She flew like a machine. No wasted movement. No overcorrection. Every bank, every throttle change was smooth enough to be invisible if you weren't watching closely. That kind of precision came from years, decades of flight time. It made sense now why she'd been silent so long. She was letting them read her in the air before she gave anything away. And then, as if on cue, her right hand moved deliberately toward the radio panel. Falcon straightened. After all this, maybe she was ready to tell them something. The radio hissed once. Then her voice came through low, calm, and without the slightest hint of stress. "Eagle 2-1, this is Viper." Falcon froze for half. A second. That name Viper carried weight in the fighter community. It wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend. Every pilot had heard the stories. A woman who could fly anything, beat anyone, and disappear without leaving so much as a shadow on the records. Blade's voice was quiet on the secure channel. "Falcon, you know who that is?" "Yeah," Falcon said. "And if it's really her, this is way above our pay grade." Back at NORAD, the name caused a different kind of stir. Older officers looked at each other knowingly. Some left. Their stations to make hurried phone calls. The younger techs, unaware of the significance, simply kept running checks. Within moments, Falcon's helmet speakers carried new orders. "Falcon, Blade, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Maintain escort to Nellis. Confirmation of identity. Is in progress." That was the final clue Falcon needed. Whoever she was, whatever she was flying, the chain of command had just shifted from cautious to careful. She was no longer an intruder, they were her escort. Falcon adjusted his position, sliding in closer to protect her flank. Blade mirrored the move on the other side. For the first time, she turned her head toward Falcon's canopy. Her visor was still dark, but he swore he felt the weight of her gaze. Not a challenge, not hostility, just acknowledgement. And then, she turned back forward, her jet slicing through the bright Nevada air, leading them toward whatever waited at Nellis. The moment the call sign left her lips, the air inside Falcon's cockpit seemed to thin. "Eagle 2-1, this is Viper." Her voice was steady, low, and deliberate. No strain, no hesitation. The kind of voice you'd expect from someone who had spoken into a radio under far worse circumstances than this. For a heartbeat, Falcon didn't move. He simply stared at the weathered jet, holding perfect position between two of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. His mind raced not with what to say next, but with the weight of what he'd just heard. Viper. The stories came back instantly, half-whispered in squadron-ready rooms and bars at bases around the globe. A test pilot who could take any aircraft to its absolute limit. A woman who'd trained some of the Air Force's greatest aces, then vanished without ceremony. Theories had swirled for years: black projects, foreign advisory missions, experimental stealth programs, but none had ever been confirmed. She'd simply disappeared. And now she was here, flying in restricted airspace, calmly announcing herself, as though 20 years hadn't passed. Blade broke the silence first, his voice quieter than usual over their secure channel. "Falcon, you think it's actually her?" Falcon's eyes stayed fixed ahead. "If it's not, someone's playing a very dangerous game." At NORAD, the name detonated like a classified code word in a crowded room. The older officers reacted first, some leaning into the comm stations, others standing so fast their chairs scraped against the floor. It wasn't just recognition, it was the dawning realization that this situation had shifted from an interception to something far more sensitive. "Get me her service record," the watch commander ordered, voice clipped. "And run a voice. Match against historical recordings. Use the secure archive." Technicians scrambled to comply. In the meantime, the chain of command did something Falcon had never experienced before. Mid-intercept pause for almost 20 seconds before giving new instructions. When the reply came through, the voice from NORAD was calmer, more measured. "Falcon, Blade, do not take any aggressive action. Maintain current position. Confirmation is in progress." The difference was subtle, but unmistakable. 5 minutes earlier, she'd been an unresponsive intruder. Now, the order to maintain position sounded almost like a request to stay with her, not to contain her. Blade noticed it too. "Escort orders?" he asked, incredulous. "Escort. Orders," Falcon confirmed. Guess we're her wingman now. The small jet ahead made a minute course correction, dipping slightly south. Falcon and Blade matched her instantly, holding their protective triangle. For the first time since they'd intercepted her, she turned her helmet slightly toward Falcon's canopy. Even through the mirrored visor, he felt her measuring him, not in hostility, but in that cool, assessing way instructors used when deciding if a student was worth their time. She didn't transmit again, didn't need to. That single transmission had been enough to turn the entire interception on its head. Back on the ground, analysts confirmed what the pilots already suspected. The voice match was conclusive. 99.8% probability it belonged to Lieutenant Colonel Rhett Catherine Viper Halle, USAF, last seen in uniform in 2003. Tail number matched an aircraft that had been officially logged as decommissioned and scrapped in 1999, a mismatch that raised more questions than it answered. "Sir," a younger officer at NORAD asked, "if she's been gone this long, how is she flying in one of our old birds with that kind of performance?" The watch commander didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room was wondering. The same thing. Orders came down from even higher beyond NORAD's chain, from the Pentagon itself. Do not engage. Do not question. Escort her to Nellis Air Force Base. Full security clearance for base personnel on arrival. When Falcon heard that final instruction, something in him tightened. "Control, Falcon. Confirm full clearance." "She's bringing something in?" "Affirmative, Falcon. Maintain escort. This flight is priority. Priority." That one word said more than any debrief ever could. Whatever she was carrying, whether in her head or in her hair, it mattered enough for the Pentagon to override standing interception protocol. The flight to Nellis was just under 100 miles now. At this speed, they'd be wheels down in less than 15 minutes. Falcon used the time to study every detail he could see. The way her control surfaces moved just before turbulence, the micro-adjustments of her throttle. She was reading the air like a book. Blade spoke quietly on the secure channel. "You realize when we land, we're not walking away from this with answers." Falcon smirked. "Maybe not. But we'll have one hell of a story." Below them, the desert began to shift. More roads, more buildings, the telltale geometric shapes of military infrastructure. Nellis Air Force Base came into view, its long runways like pale scars against the sand. Falcon called it in. Control. Falcon visual on Nellis. Beginning descent with package. Copy, Falcon. Tower is expecting you. Proceed to runway 21. Ground escort is ready. They dipped lower, the air growing heavier with heat. The small jet ahead handled the descent with effortless grace, bleeding altitude without losing speed. She led them in as though she were the one in charge, her approach textbook perfect. Touchdown was smooth hers first, the Raptors seconds behind. As they taxied toward the secure hangars, Falcon noticed the ground crew already in position. They weren't the usual mix of maintenance techs and PMPs. This team was all high-ranking officers and plainclothes personnel with clipped, purposeful movements. When she rolled to a stop, the ladder was at her cockpit before her canopy even finished opening. She removed her helmet slowly, revealing short, silver-streaked hair and a face lined not with age, but with the kind of experience that left deeper marks than time alone could. A general stepped forward, saluting. She returned it casually, then stepped down from the jet with the steady balance of someone who had spent more years in the air than on the ground. Falcon and Blade shut down their Raptors, but stayed in their cockpits long enough to watch the exchange. They couldn't hear the words, but the body language said it all. This wasn't a capture. This was a reception. As she walked toward the hangar, she glanced once over her shoulder, just briefly, at the two F-22 pilots who had been sent to intercept her. The faintest smile touched her lips, the kind that wasn't mocking, but carried the unspoken message. Good job keeping up. Then she was gone, disappearing into the hangar with her jet, surrounded by officers who closed ranks like a shield. Falcon sat back in his seat, pulling off his helmet slowly. Well, he muttered to himself, I guess the stories were true. The hangar doors shut with a deep, resonant clang, sealing Viper and her mysterious aircraft away from prying eyes. From their cockpits, Falcon and Blade saw nothing more, only the shadows shifting behind the steel. On the ground frequency, the tower's voice came through. Falcon, Blade shut down and report to Hangar 6 for immediate debrief. Blade chuckled dryly over the secure channel. Immediate debrief? More like immediate blackout. Falcon powered down his Raptor, feeling the subtle vibration of the engines fade beneath him. Let's find out, he replied, though he knew Blade was right. Debriefings usually meant notes, timelines, and after-action reports. This one would likely end with them signing papers promising silence. Inside Hangar 6, the air was cool, the lighting dim. Two security personnel checked their IDs, scanned them, then took their phones, watches, and even the small pens clipped to their flight suits. They were escorted into a conference room with no windows, its walls a dull, soundproof gray. Waiting inside were 3 men and 1 woman, all in uniform, all wearing the expression of people who had already decided what you would and would not be told. At the head of the table sat a 2-star general, his uniform crisp, his ribbons neat. Sit, he said, without looking up from the folder in front of him. They sat. The general closed the folder deliberately before speaking. Your intercept today was by the book. Your formation discipline was noted and commended. You will file no written report. You will not speak about this mission to anyone outside this room. Do you understand? Yes, sir, they said in unison. He studied them for a moment, as if measuring whether they were the kind of pilots who might be tempted to push back. Neither did. You've heard the call sign before, he continued. Viper, some of you more than others. You will have questions. You will not get answers. Not today. What you need to know is that she is operating under direct orders from the highest level. Her presence is not a security breach. It is an operation, one that is classified beyond your current clearance. Blade frowned slightly. Sir, She was flying an aircraft that hasn't existed on the record for over 20 years. Performance exceeded known specs. "Are we cleared to?" The general cut him off with a raised hand. "No, you are not cleared to speculate. Not here. Not anywhere. Your official intercept log will read as follows. Escort training exercise with classified participant. Mission successful. No incidents." It was the vaguest after-action note Falcon had ever heard. The woman at the tabler. Insignia marking her as an intelligence colonel spoke for the first time. Colonel Hale's reappearance is not accidental. The timing is critical. The mission profile unprecedented. You've seen enough to know she still has it. What you haven't seen and won't is what she's bringing with her. Falcon exchanged a glance with Blade. That last sentence wasn't careless. It was bait. The general stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "You'll be released to your quarters. You will maintain alert status for the next 72 hours. Dismissed." They left the hangar without another word, escorted back to the flight line to retrieve their gear. Outside, the desert sun was blinding after the dim conference room, but Falcon's mind was still on the shadowed hangar where Viper and her jet were hidden. Meanwhile, inside that hangar, the scene was different. Viper stood at the center of her, helmet tucked under her arm, watching as a team of technicians moved around her jet. The aircraft looked aged at first glance, paint worn, panels dull, but up close, there were differences. Entire sections of the fuselage bore materials that shimmered faintly under the lights, shifting like liquid metal. Antenna arrays unfamiliar. Even to the senior engineers protruded from the spine. A man in civilian clothes approached a tall, wiry figure with a NASA badge clipped to his jacket. "Colonel Hale," he said, "it's been a long time." "Dr. Carver," she replied evenly. "You're still wearing the same tie." He glanced down at the faded blue silk. "Some things don't need upgrading. Others," his eyes slid to the jet, "others require an overhaul." Viper didn't smile. "She's fine as she is." Carver shook his head slightly. "If what you told me overcomes is true, this could change more than just Air Force protocol. We'll need a full data pull before." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You'll get your data. But you know as well as I do, if this isn't handled right, we're not talking about protocol. We're talking about history repeating itself." The technicians paused their work just long enough to glance at the exchange before returning to their tasks. None spoke. Back in the pilot's quarters, Blade paced while Falcon sat on the edge of his bunk, still replaying the intercept in his mind. "You know what's driving me crazy?" Blade said finally. "The way they reacted the second she said her call sign. That was instant recognition, not just military respect fear." Falcon nodded slowly. "Fear of what she knows. Or maybe fear of what she's carrying." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Whatever it is, it's not just about her coming back. It's about her coming back now." Blade stopped pacing. "You think she's on our side?" Falcon didn't answer immediately. "I think she's on her own side, which might be the same as ours or not." That night, the base felt different, more guarded, more watchful. Security patrols doubled. Hangar 6 stayed lit long past midnight, shadows of movement visible through the narrow gaps at the roofline. Falcon lay awake, listening to the occasional rumble of distant machinery. Somewhere in that building, Viper was preparing for something big, and he had the distinct, unsettling feeling that when it happened, they wouldn't be intercepting her. They'd be following her lead. At 3:17 hours, Falcon's room phone buzzed once short, sharp, and utterly out of place at that hour. No one called on base phones after midnight, unless it was urgent. He grabbed the receiver. "Falcon," he said, voice rough with sleep. The voice on the other end was calm, precise, and distinctly female. "Suit up. Hangar 6. 2 minutes." He sat up instantly. Viper? The line went dead. Across the hall, Blade's door opened before Falcon could knock. Blade, all ready, had his boots halfway on. You two? He asked. Falcon nodded. 2 minutes. They didn't ask questions. In the Air Force, when a voice like hers gave an order, you moved. Hangar 6 was alive with activity, far more than during daylight. The massive doors were cracked open, just enough to allow the tail of Viper's aircraft to be silhouetted against the floodlights outside. Technicians swarmed the jet, feeding cables into access panels, loading canisters into bays, attaching strange pods to hardpoints. Viper stood beside the nose gear, helmet under her arm, speaking to a tall man in a dark flight jacket. She turned. As they approached, "You're flying with me," she said without preamble. Blade's brows shot up. Flying where? She didn't answer him directly. Instead, she tossed each of them a sealed folder. Mission packets. Don't open until we're airborne. Wheels up in 9 minutes. Falcon hesitated. We don't have clearance. She stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. You do now. I'm reinstating you under Special Authorization Echo. Consider yourselves recalled to my command. Falcon glanced at Blade, whose smirk said everything: confusion, adrenaline, and the thrill of being pulled into something that broke all the usual rules. 5 minutes later, they were strapped into their Raptors. Ground crews moved like clockwork, pushing final checks at breakneck speed. Viper's voice came over the encrypted channel. Form up on me once we're wheels up. Stay close, stay quiet. As they taxied out, Falcon caught sight of something on her jet's underbelly markings he didn't recognize. A pattern of black triangles over silver panels that shimmered faintly, even under the harsh runway lights. The tower cleared them for immediate departure. Engines roared, afterburners lit, and they were airborne in less than 30 seconds. At 20,000 feet, Viper spoke again. Open your packets. Falcon tore the seal on his. Inside were 3 pages satellite images, a map of the Pacific, and a terse set of coordinates over open water. In the margins, a single phrase was handwritten. Package retrieval, no hostile engagement, unless fired upon. What's the package? Blade asked. Viper's reply was cold and clipped. It's older than both of you put together. And if it falls into the wrong hands, we're not talking about a news headline. We're talking about a new war. 2 hours into the flight, they approached a stretch of ocean so remote it wasn't even on standard Air Force patrol grids. Below them, a storm system churned, lightning flickering through the clouds like distant artillery. Viper descended without warning, punching through the cloud deck until the dark water loomed below. Falcon and Blade followed, their HUDs flickering with static before stabilizing. Then Falcon saw it. Half submerged in the waves was a massive shape too angular to be natural, too weathered to be new. It looked like the wreckage of an aircraft, like nothing he recognized. Viper's voice cut in. That's the package. And before you ask, yes, it's ours, or at least it was. A new voice entered the comms, male, urgent. Eagle control to Viper satellite confirms inbound bogies, 20 miles out, bearing 085. Speed suggests supersonic. You've got maybe 6 minutes. Blade swore under his breath. So much for no hostile engagement. They dropped lower, their jet skimming the ocean surface. Falcon's eyes scanned the wreckage. Parts of it were coated in the same shifting metal sheen as Viper's jet. Falcon, Blade, cover me, she ordered. Her aircraft hovered over the wreckage in a way that shouldn't have been aerodynamically possible. Panels on her belly opened, extending. A cradle-like apparatus. It locked onto the central section of the wreck and began hoisting it upward. Falcon's radar chirped 3 fast movers, closing rapidly. Their signatures weren't American. "Viper, we've got company." "I know," she replied. "Just buy me 90 seconds. Falcon and Blade broke formation, climbing to intercept. The bogies came into view, sleek, needle-nosed fighters in matte gray, markings stripped, their shapes unfamiliar, but clearly dangerous. "Unidentified aircraft. This is U.S. Air Force Flight Lead," Falcon broadcast. "You are in restricted airspace. Turn away immediately." The lead bogie answered with a burst of radar lock. "Yes, that's a no," Blade muttered. Missiles flared from the enemy's wings. Falcon rolled hard, flares exploding behind him, the missile veering. Off. Blade dove under the second, pulling a tight loop to get on the attacker's tail. The sky became chaos jets screaming past each other, tracers arcing, the ocean flashing below with each missile detonation. Through it all, Viper's voice remained steady. 30 seconds. Falcon managed to get a tone on one of the enemy. Jets can squeeze the trigger. The missile streaked forward, hitting dead center. The explosion lit up the clouds, debris raining into the waves. 15 seconds, Viper called. Blade drove the second bogey low, forcing it into a defensive roll until it peeled off entirely, climbing hard and vanishing into the storm. The third came at Falcon head-on, guns blazing. He rolled inverted at the last second, the rounds missing. By feet, then came around in a tight turn. Before he could fire, Viper's voice cut in. "Package secured, break off now." They regrouped, climbing fast. Behind them, the ocean swallowed the wreck's resting place, leaving only churned waves and the faint glimmer of debris. Viper's aircraft carried the recovered section slung beneath it, like a predator carrying prey. As they cleared the storm, the remaining bogey didn't follow. Either it had decided the fight wasn't worth it, or it had orders not to tangle with Viper directly. No one spoke for several minutes. The silence was heavier than the adrenaline crash. Finally, Falcon broke it. "That wasn't a wreck, was it? Not just a wreck." Viper's reply was quiet, almost reluctant. "No, that was a piece of something we built in the 80s. And we weren't supposed to be able to build it." By the time they touched down at the base, dawn was breaking, casting the hangar in orange light. Ground crews immediately moved the package inside, tarps thrown over it before anyone could get a good look. As Falcon climbed from his cockpit, Viper approached. She didn't thank them. She didn't smile. She simply said, "You're in this now, both of you, whether you like it or not." Then she walked away, disappearing into the shadows of hangar. 6. Falcon looked at Blade. "We're not getting out of this, are we?" Blade shook his head slowly. "Would you even want to?" Falcon had been in countless debriefs before, some classified, some urgent, some painfully slow, but nothing like this. He and Blade sat in a windowless conference room deep within the base, the kind of room where you forgot what time it was, and how long you'd been inside. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and new paper. 2 guards stood outside the door, armed and stone-faced. Across from them, Viper studied a slim folder. She didn't speak until the door opened and a man in a charcoal suit entered. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed, hair clipped close to the scalp. No insignia, no nameplate, no introduction. Viper stood, director. The man gave the faintest nod before taking a seat, his gaze fixed on Falcon and Blade, like he was measuring every molecule of their presence. "What you pulled out of the water last night," he began without preamble, "was not a wreck in the conventional sense. It was an asset, and it's been missing for 37 years. Blade leaned forward. "Missing? As in shot down?" The man shook his head. "As in, deliberately sunk. Buried in the deepest coordinates we could find, with no beacon. No trace, no paper trail. That location was supposed to be a grave no one could find." Falcon frowned. So who found it? The director's expression darkened. Someone who's been looking for it longer than you've been flying. And they're not working alone. Viper slid a photo across the table, Granny, taken at night. It showed a silhouette of a man boarding a ship under floodlights. The hull bore no flag, no registration. This is your target, Viper said. Code name, Iron Hand. Former Soviet test pilot, defected in the early 90s. Since then, he's been a ghost, pops up in conflicts, always on the winning side, never leaves a fingerprint. We have reason to believe he's backed by a private syndicate with resources that rival small nations. Blade studied the image. And he wants, what? The tech? Not just the tech, the director said. The thing you recovered is part of an experimental stealth weapons platform codenamed Wraith, built under a program so classified, most of our own brass didn't know it existed. Falcon crossed his arms. Let me guess, it could turn the tide of any modern conflict. The director didn't blink. It could end one before it starts, permanently. And that's what scares. U.S. Viper leaned in. You saw how fast those fighters showed up last night. Iron Hand's network knew exactly when and where to intercept. That means we have a leak or worse, a mole inside our own house. Blade gave a humorless laugh. So you called us in because we're clean? Viper's eyes locked on his. I called you in because you're good. You're unpredictable. And you don't owe anyone in the chain of command your loyalty right now. That makes you dangerous in the right way. The director slid 2 new folders across the table. Inside were aerial photos of a remote island chain, coordinates marked in red. This is where Iron Hand is headed next, he said. Satellite overflight this morning caught a freighter matching his ship's profile. We think he's planning to rendezvous with a second wreck, one we never found. Falcon's stomach tightened. Another Wraith component? The director nodded once. The final one. If he gets it, the system will be operational. Viper tapped the map. We're wheels up in 3 hours. This time, we're not just retrieving, we're eliminating the target and the asset. In the ready room, Falcon and Blade suited up, the silence between them thick with unspoken thoughts. You believe all this? Blade finally asked, fastening his G-suit. Falcon checked his helmet seals. After last night? I believe enough. But I don't trust the full story. Blade smirked faintly. Good. Means you're still thinking like a survivor. They walked to the flight line where their Raptors waited, armed to the teeth missiles, bombs, external fuel tanks for long-range operations. Viper's jets sat between theirs, ground crew working with almost religious precision. She approached, helmet in hand. Once we're in theater, comms go dark. If you get separated, follow the beacon frequency in your packets. We have one shot. At this, no second passes. The flight was long, silent, except for necessary check-ins. Hours of blue ocean stretched below until, at last, jagged green islands appeared on the horizon, their shores ringed with white surf. Viper's voice broke the monotony. Eyes up. We've got heat blooms near the main island, looks like a makeshift airstrip. Falcon's HUD confirmed it. 3 fighter-sized contacts parked near a long strip of dirt. And on the shoreline, a cargo ship unloading containers. Blade's voice was tight. Freighter matches the photo. Viper didn't hesitate. We go low and fast. Blade, you take the airstrip. Falcon, you're on ship detail. I'll handle whatever's in the containers. They dropped to treetop level, afterburners cold to reduce their infrared signature. The island rushed beneath them, jungle blurring into shoreline. Falcon peeled toward the freighter, his sensors locking on anti-air emplacements welded to the deck. He fired before they could track him, missiles streaking in, tearing the mounts apart in twin fireballs. Over the comms, Blade's voice came sharp. 2 birds trying to scramble. Not happening. Seconds later, explosions bloomed over the strip, the enemy fighters reduced to twisted metal. Viper's tone was steady. Container yards hot. Multiple hostiles, moving to engage. From his angle, Falcon caught glimpses of the yard rows. Of shipping containers, forklifts abandoned mid-load, armed men scattering under strafing runs. Viper's jet danced between the rows, her weapons unnervingly precise. "Falcon," she called. "One container just went live heat spikes off the charts. That's our second Wraith component." Before he could respond, a streak of motion on his radar made his blood run cold. 3 fast movers inbound from the east, their signatures unfamiliar again. "Iron Hand's reinforcements," Blade said grimly. The fight was immediate and brutal. The enemy pilots were too good to be mercenaries. They used the terrain, weaving between cliffs and sea spray, forcing Falcon and Blade into close-quarters dogfighting. Falcon took one down with a snapshot, the missile hitting so close he felt the shockwave through his jet's frame. Blade tangled with the second, finally forcing it into the ocean in a plume of steam. But the third broke past them, heading straight for the container yard. "Viper break!" Falcon shouted. Her voice came back calm, controlled, negative. "I've got him." In one impossible maneuver, she pulled vertical, rolled inverted, and dropped directly into the enemy's path. Her cannons lit the air, shredding the hostile in seconds. When the debris splashed down, the only sounds on comms were heavy breathing. Viper's tone returned to business, components secured. "We've got to move Iron Hand's not here, which means he's already planning his next move." Falcon keyed in. "Any idea where?" Her pause was telling. "Yeah, and if I'm right, it's a place we were never supposed to go back to." They climbed out over the ocean, the island fading behind them, black smoke curling into the sky. Falcon glanced at Blade's jet, then at Viper's. He knew whatever came next would make tonight look tame. And deep down, he wasn't sure if that scared him or thrilled him. Falcon had been trying not to think about the place Viper meant, but as soon as she said it, the image surfaced: bleak coastline, rusting hangars, and a sky that always seemed overcast, even in summer. The graveyard. Officially, it was a decommissioned testing range off the Aleutian chain. Unofficially, it was where the U.S. buried failed prototypes, dangerous experiments, and classified projects too risky to scrap publicly. No one went there. No one came back with photos. If Iron Hand was heading there, it meant only one thing: the original Wraith prototype hadn't been destroyed after all. The briefing was short and cold. "This is off the books," Viper told them as they refueled midder over the Pacific. "If we're caught, the government will deny we were ever here. This isn't just retrieval anymore, it's prevention." Blade's voice came over the comms, dry as ever. Translation: "We're ghosts." Viper didn't argue. "We hit at dawn. Intel says Iron Hand's convoy will reach the site by first light. If he activates the full system, we're looking at a weapon that can cripple every aircraft carrier in the hemisphere without firing a single bullet." Falcon glanced at his HUD. "That's a lot of power for one man." Viper's reply was grim. "Which is why we can't let him have it." The Aleutians appeared like jagged teeth in the morning mist. Snow capped the peaks, and the sea below churned like it wanted to swallow the islands whole. The graveyard was on the farthest island, a strip of flat tundra surrounded by rusted fences and decaying watchtowers. As they approached, their sensors lit up with electronic noise jamming, so strong Falcon's radar blurred into static. "They're blindfolding us," Blade muttered. "Then we'll fly with our eyes," Falcon replied, adjusting to visual. Flight. Through the mist, shapes emerged. Hangars big enough to swallow a C-5 Galaxy, cranes bent with age, and a line of vehicles crawling toward a central building. Then Falcon saw it. A massive cylindrical object loaded on a flatbed, covered in weather-stained tarp. Even from altitude, the scale was obvious. This was no ordinary missile or aircraft part. That's the heart of the Wraith, Viper said, voice low. Power core. If it's intact, Iron Hand can finish the system in hours. Before they could line up for a strike, tracers cut through the mist. Anti-air batteries hidden in the cliffs spat fire, forcing them to break formation. Multiple AA sites west and south ridges, Blade called. Blade, take the west. Falcon, you're with me on the south, Viper ordered. Falcon dove toward the ridge, hugging the slope, to stay below the gun's depression limits. His missiles roared away, smashing into the first battery in a bloom of orange and black. He skimmed over the cliff edge, catching a flash of enemy fighters, taking off from a makeshift runway carved into the tundra. Viper, we've got company fast movers, 2 o'clock. On them? She replied, rolling inverted and diving into the fight. The dogfight was tight, brutal, and merciless. The enemy pilots were aggressive, using the terrain to mask their approach, popping up only to fire before ducking back behind ridges. Falcon took down one with a high G turn and a well-timed shot, but the second nearly clipped him with a missile before Viper shredded it from behind. With the skies momentarily clear, they regrouped over the convoy. Blade had already neutralized the western guns and was circling for a strafing run. Falcon, you take the flatbed. I'll cover, he said. Falcon lined up, thumb hovering over the trigger, and froze. Iron Hand was there, standing on the flatbed itself. The man didn't move, didn't flinch, even as Falcon's Raptor screamed overhead. His gaze followed the jet like a predator, tracking prey. In one hand, he held what looked like a simple remote. Viper's voice cut in sharply. Falcon, do not fire. Why? He demanded. That remote's not for show, she said. It's the failsafe. You hit that core while he's holding it. It could go critical. The blast radius would take half the island. Iron Hand seemed to know they were hesitating. He turned slowly, stepped down from the flatbed, and began walking toward the central building, flanked by armed guards. The tarp-covered core rolled behind him on the truck, like pet following its master. Viper's tone hardened. We can't take the shot from the air. We go in. Falcon blinked. Go in? As in? On foot? You heard me. Gear up. Minutes later, the Raptor sat camouflaged in a frozen gulch, while the 3 pilots moved on foot through the tundra. The wind cut like glass, and the snow crunched under their boots. The central building loomed ahead, its metal siding rusted, its windows black. A faded sign over the entrance read Project Meridian Restricted. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of old oil and wet concrete. Their footsteps echoed down narrow halls, lined with doors welded shut. They could hear the convoy outside, the low rumble of engines, the scrape of chains as the power core was moved. They split up. Blade took the catwalk above the main hangar, providing overwatch. Viper moved toward the convoy's route, crouched behind a stack of crates. Falcon skirted the floor, keeping low. Iron Hand stood near the center, the remote still in his hand. He spoke in Russian to a technician who was connecting thick cables from the core to a control console. Blade's voice crackled in their earpieces. Looks like they're about 5 minutes from powering that thing up, Viper replied. We don't give them 5 minutes. It happened fast. Viper broke cover first, her suppressed rifle dropping 2 guards before they could react. Falcon sprinted forward, diving behind the flatbed as bullets sparked off its frame. Iron Hand didn't run. He turned, meeting Falcon's eyes across the chaos, and pressed his thumb against the failsafe. Falcon's heart stopped, but nothing happened. Iron Hand's grin was cold. You think I'd keep the real detonator in my hand? No, it's already armed. From somewhere deeper in the building, a rising hum filled the air. The core was coming online. Falcon, blade split, and find that control source, Viper barked. Falcon ducked into a side corridor, following the sound. The hum grew louder, until he reached a chamber filled with machinery, cables snaking into the walls. In the center, a glowing sphere of energy pulsed inside a containment cage. A technician spun toward him, reaching for a weapon. Falcon fired first, and dashed to the console. The readout showed 2 minutes to full activation. He ripped open a panel, yanked the main coupling, and sparks erupted in a blinding flash. The hum faltered. Then the entire building shook as a massive explosion ripped through the far side. Blade's voice came over comms. Secondary core just took half the hangar with it. Get out, now. Falcon sprinted back toward the hangar, catching sight of Iron Hand escaping through a side door with 2 guards. Viper, he's heading for the dock. I'm on him, she replied. They burst out into the freezing air just as Iron Hand's speedboat roared to life. Viper raised her rifle, sighted in, and fired. The shot shattered the remote in his hand, but he dove into the boat and sped into the mist. They made it back to their Raptors minutes before the first secondary explosions consumed the graveyard. As they climbed into the sky, the island below became a sheet of flame, black smoke curling into the dawn. No Wraith, no core, no Iron Hand. Blade broke the silence. So, we stopped him? Viper's reply was quiet, for now. Falcon didn't speak. He knew men like Iron Hand didn't vanish. They waited, they planned. And somewhere out there, he was already making his next move.